All right, hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be going over solving absolute value equations. All right, so obviously these are just going to be equations that have an absolute value in them, and these can be a little bit tricky at first. However, we're going to start off basic and then work our way up from there, and hopefully you guys will have a solid understanding of this by the end of the video. So to start off, let's just say my goal here is to solve for x. I have the absolute value of x is equal to 4. So what could x be equal to? Well, x could be equal to 4 because I know the absolute value of 4 is 4. Or x could be equal to negative 4, right? The absolute value of negative 4 is also equal to 4. So both of these would work. The absolute value of 4 and the absolute value of negative 4 are equal to 4. And this is going to help us. This is really going to help us solve as we get going further along, because we are going to realize, well, as it gets more complicated than just x, just the absolute value of x, we can take just whatever is inside of the absolute value and set it equal to both the positive and negative of the number that's on the other side of the equal sign. So we take what's inside, we set it equal to the positive and then the negative, and we will solve both of those equations. So let's see an example with that. Here we have the absolute value of x minus 6 is equal to 3. So in this case, I know whatever's inside of the absolute value bars needs to be equal to either 3 or negative 3. So I'm going to write out those two equations. Write the two equations out. So I write, okay, well, what's on the inside is either equal to a positive 3 or what's on the inside is equal to a negative 3. And now I solve for x in each of these cases. So I add 6, boom, add 6, and I get x equals 9. Or let's add 6, add 6, I get x equals 3. So I know that x is equal to either 3 or 9. Okay, it could be equal to either one of those. If we went and plugged it back in, well, let's see what happens. Well, if I plug in 3, the absolute value of 3 minus 6 is the absolute value of negative 3, which is 3, so that works. And if I plug in 9, well, 9 minus 6 is 3. And the absolute value of 3 is also 3. So we did this right? We can always check our answers with this. Perfect. Let's do one last example. So now in this last example, I wasn't just given the absolute value on one side, right? In this example, all I have is the absolute value of x minus 6. So our first step is we are going to want to get that absolute value sign alone. And that's everything within the absolute value. Okay, my goal is to get this alone on its own side. So we'll use those inverse operations in order to get just the absolute value of x plus 6 by itself. All right, so let's run through that. The first thing I'm going to do is subtract 8 from each side. Right, we're using the reverse order of operations, so I subtract 8 from each side, cancels on the left, it's going to leave me with negative 20 on the right. So I have negative 2, absolute value of x plus 6 is equal to negative 20. And now I want to eliminate that negative 2. Well, remember, this is negative 2 times the absolute value of x plus 6. So I'm going to do the inverse operation of multiplication, and I will divide both sides by negative 2. Divide by negative 2. I'm left with the absolute value of x plus 6 equals 10. Well, now I have just the absolute value on the left side, so I can take what's in the absolute value and set it equal to the positive of 10 and the negative of 10. So x plus 6 is equal to the positive 10, or x plus 6 is equal to the negative of 10. Now we solve both of these equations, so I'll subtract 6, I get x equals 10 minus 6 is 4. Or, for this one, let's see, subtract 6, subtract 6. That cancels out on the left. Negative 10 minus 6 is negative 16. All right, so x is equal to 4, or x is equal to negative 16. All right, so in general, what are our steps for solving these absolute value equations? This is the most complicated one that we saw here. So what we're going to do first is we want to isolate the absolute value. We want to get the absolute value by itself. So we'll get the absolute value and, of course, what's inside. So get the absolute value alone. All right, and then our step 2 is we take what's inside the absolute value and I'm just going to write it as abs value, guys. Take what's inside the abs value and set it equal to the positive and negative of the other side. And set equal to positive and negative of other side. Okay, and then our third step is solve those two equations. Solve those two equations. All right, so I hope that this gave you guys a better idea of how to solve absolute value equations.